Welcome, YouTube friends and family, to today's edition of the Wellness Homesteader. So, are you afraid of canning because of botulism? Stay tuned for some tips and facts about not being afraid of botulism by canning things properly. Stay tuned. I have been canning for 41 years. Now, I didn't can every single year of that 41 years because for many years I worked and traveled and did not always have a garden or even the desire or time to can. But now in my retirement years at 61, I love canning. And I started to think a lot of us are really prepping heavier than we ever have due to the world situation. And I was catching up on some YouTube videos, y'all, and poor Germany. If you're watching from Germany, leave me a comment about your food prices because they are having huge increases, but we are as well. I went to Walmart. I did not go to Aldi, and I wanted a package of Suddenly salad. I'm not a big pasta eater, but that is a convenience item, and I like to have a combination of pantry items for cooking from scratch and then some quick things. And guys, I can remember buying it on sale for $1. Yeah, it was $2.48. So this morning I started looking online, and there are all types of recipes online where you can make your own, which would be way cheaper. And now that I have a freeze dryer, I could freeze dry it. I like the bacon ranch, the worst kind, but you could freeze dry your carrots, your peas, your onions, whatever you wanted to put in it, and bacon. And you could vacuum seal with your macaroni of choice and make your own buttermilk ranch powdered mix and have a shelf-stable version for a lot less. So I may be bringing you some types of things like that to come, but for the purpose of today, I want to talk about botulism. Now, I do not consider myself a canning expert by any means. So what I want to do today is give you facts over fear. So if you're thinking about going into the foray of pressure canning, low acid foods, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment, I just have a couple words I want to say. Make sure you're buying a pressure canner, not a pressure cooker only. So there's got to be either a weighted gauge or some type of gauge that will allow for the pressure to build up. So just make sure whatever product you're buying, it's safe for pressure canning. There are now electric pressure canners, which I've debated on, but I decided instead I'd rather have the freeze dryer. So it'll be a while before I will have an electric pressure canner, and I think they will come down in price greatly because now there are a lot of different brands where there was just, I think Presto was the first. Now Instapot has one. So just make sure that you know what you're buying, that you maintain it according to the directions, that you have your pressure gauge calibrated, and we're going to talk about why that's important, and that you follow all the safety precautions. Okay, those are all kind of givens, right? But what about botulism? So here are my 4 tips, and then we're going to go into the science of botulism. So the first thing is have an approved canning book. Now, y'all, I had the USDA Guide to Canning. You can download it for free or you can buy it very economically. I gave it to my son because I can go online and look it up, and I have several USDA approved canning books. This is the complete book of home preserving from Ball, and all of these recipes are USDA tested and approved. So just because something isn't USDA approved really only means that it's not been tested, so safety is unknown. So I encourage everyone not to rebel can. That's just me. Unless you do your research and you are confident that the item you're canning is truly safe. All right. Number 2, you need to understand the difference between things that can be water bathed and things that must be pressure canned. And you can find that information in your approved canning book. You can generally water bath, like jams, jellies, and any high acid foods like pickles, tomatoes, those types of things. But low acid foods like beans or potatoes or meats have to be pressure canned. It is so important that you know the difference between the two. Just because a jar is sealed does not mean what's inside is safe if it hasn't been properly prepared. All right, number 3. This is one of my pet peeves. Properly clean your equipment. So I don't care if it's a brand new flat of jars, guys. Please, please, please wash those in hot sippy water. Sanitize those jars as well as you can, because as fact, botulism spores are everywhere, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. You don't know who's handled that jar, what's in that jar, and if there are any botulism spores, you want to make sure that you wash those away as best you can. And then we're going to talk about the true destroyer of botulism in just a moment. Okay, number 4, observe headspace, processing times, and most importantly, rest times. And we're going to talk about why in just a moment. So guys, basically I'm just telling you the book, go to the book. It's in the book. All right, so what on earth is botulism? It is a rare and potentially fatal illness that is caused by an organism or a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. So since it's a spore, it's in the case, kind of like an M&M. Think of it that way. And the danger part is the toxin that it releases from inside if that M&M shell, so to speak, is broken open. And there are certain conditions that keep that botulism from opening up, or that M&M not to melt in your hand for sure. Those spores are common in soil, okay? Where's food grown? In the soil, and our water, believe it or not. So why are we not all sick all the time? Why are we not all dead? Why are there not more cases? Well, because there are certain things that we will talk about that will cause that spore to open up and release its toxin and potentially give you a life-threatening illness. So what happens when you get botulism? Okay, I criticize no one for getting Botox. Personally, I would not, and I have plenty of wrinkles, guys. I've got a turkey neck that never was there before. However, Botox is botulism toxin injected into certain areas, which I kind of need like a whole face and neck. And what it does is it paralyzes the muscles. Well, when you have botulism, when it affects your body, that's exactly what happens. You start to have progressive weakness and paralysis that can actually stop you breathing and be very difficult to reverse. There are different types of botulism. For today, we're going to be talking about foodborne botulism. There's infant botulism, there's wound botulism. So if you have an open area, you can get botulism there as well. So how prevalent really is botulism? So when I was working, one of the very trusted websites for me was always the CDC website. So I had 850-ish locations in the US. I won't talk about Canada and Portugal, but that was, for the purpose of this discussion, a lot of my main concern was 854 locations that were in 48 states. So there was a lot of odd things that would come up that were communicable diseases, lice, scabies, all of those creepy things. Never botulism. But one of the things about the CDC is they do have really good data about statistically what is happening with different diseases. So that is where I got my information. The last reported was 2018. and there were 18 cases reported related to home canned or home fermented, that can be a danger too, foods. It's always higher in Alaska than any other state, and they use seal oil, seal blubber, and fermented fish, and they're using an ancient technique that may not kill the botulism spore. So I encourage you to be careful with your seal oil and your seal blubber. And some of the things they fermented was like seal fin, some strange things, fish heads, just, not part of my diet. But hey, if you're from Alaska, this is good information for you. And we actually had 2 locations, one in Anchorage and one in Wasilla. So I've had the pleasure of visiting there as well. So before 1950, to contrast to the 2018 stats, every year, guys, there were 3,000 to 4,000 cases a year. So the FDA got involved, and that is where our safe canning practices came to be. Now, across the US, we're at less than 100 a year. Now, I gave you 18 cases in 18. That was from home canned food. There were other cases of botulism, such as wound or infant. And let me just say something about infant. That is why you are encouraged not to give your child honey under a certain age. Check with your pediatrician, because they don't have good defenses against those botulism spores, and there can be botulism spores in honey. It won't hurt us as an adult because our stomach is more acidic and bigger than an infant's. All right. So let me tell you about a case that I thought, oh my word, I'm lucky I've never gotten botulism. And it doesn't have to do with home canning. Let me get a drink out of my sippy cup. So in 1994, a deli took potatoes, washed them, wrapped them in foil, but they left them outside of the refrigerator for 3 to 4 days. And then they took those potatoes and made some type of a dip. And as a result, wait a minute, I don't want to give you the wrong thing. 30 people developed botulism. And I'm like, how? Well, first of all, I wouldn't leave potatoes unrefrigerated. But what I've learned is, when we're going to talk about the 5 things that a food needs for botulism to develop and prosper, that we should not, it's okay to bake your potatoes in foil, but as soon as you're done baking them, you should take off and dispose of the foil and make sure you store in the refrigerator. So I always store in the refrigerator, but honestly, guys, if I make a baked potato, I would leave it in the foil, and that is a total no-no, and I'm going to tell you why. So if botulism is everywhere, why don't we get sick? The acid in our stomach destroys the botulism spores for the most part, but in certain instances and in certain environments, botulism can become active. So it probably largely depends on the load that we're taking in, whether or not our bodies can handle it. So what are the 5 things that absolutely cause botulism to grow? The first, and keep thinking about that potato, is low acid. Is potato low acid? Yes. It's not an orange, it's not a tomato, it's definitely low acid. The second thing is low oxygen. So if you go back to the potato, we've wrapped it in the foil, so there isn't a lot of oxygen getting inside that actual potato. So, and we're gonna do the same 5 with a jar of canned goods. Number 3, it needs moisture. Is there moisture in a baked potato? You bet. It's not dry inside there. Number 4, it needs a protein source to feed on, and that would be the food, the potato. And number 5, warm temps. Now, that's why you need to refrigerate, but let's just say you didn't, or you left them out, or you forgot them in the oven. Definitely throw them away. Don't eat them. because it's had all 5 of those conditions for botulism to multiply and start reproducing, so to speak. Okay, so then let's take a jar. Let's just do applesauce. So is this, nope, let's not. Let's do green beans, because this is a good one. Is this low acid? Absolutely. Is it low oxygen? Well, it's pressure canned and sealed. So yes, it's low oxygen. Is there moisture? Yeah, definitely. Is there a protein source? The beans. And is it warm? Well, no. Storing your canned goods properly is going to make a big difference. But if I had not canned these properly, according to the book, I have set up an environment where botulism could grow and prosper. Now, I'm not telling you this because I want to scare you. I want you to think, because as we urgently try to prep, and maybe we're trying to put some things that are on our shelves or in our freezer into jars for long-term keeping, for storage purposes, let's just make sure we do it right. So what is low acid food? Fish, meat, a lot of vegetables, and definitely beans of any kind. So how are we going to kill the botulism? How are we not going to be afraid of our food? So let me show you what I have here. I have a jar of tomatoes, some applesauce, and some pickles. Now, these are all high acid foods that were water bath canned, and they're safe. And because of the acid content and because they were heated and properly sealed, I am not worried about botulism, because botulism can't grow unless it's in a low acid environment. So let's set those aside and let's look at some things that I've canned that are definitely not low acid. First, here I have sweet potatoes. Secondly, and I think there's some maple syrup in that, some sloppy Joe mix. And third is green beans with a little ham. So meat, potato. Are these low acid? Yes. So even stored properly, unless they are properly heated, and we're going to talk specifically what you need to do, these are high-risk foods for botulism. Who knew, right? Okay, so the first 3 were water bath canned, the second 3 were pressure canned. So how do you kill botulism? Thermal death. You heat it up, guys. So you need 240 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, or for those of you who are Celsius, 115 to 121 for a prescribed time. Now, what's boiling point? That's 212. So we need temperatures well above boiling point. And how the FDA or the USDA got these canning times is they determined what it took for thermal death. How long do you have to process a given food at a given temperature to cause thermal death? So think about your pressure canner. Your pressure canner actually reaches temperatures in the 240 to 250 Fahrenheit over time and pressure. So when you first put it in, the temperature will rise, and hopefully you're holding it at, that's why they say if your pressure drops, you have to start your time over, because it needs that length of time. So for example, a pint of green beans like this needs 20 minutes. So let's think about shortcuts. I don't shortcut because I know about botulism, but let's say you're kind of in a hurry and it's really hot in your kitchen and you think, I processed it that long, I'm gonna not let it have its cool down time. I'm gonna turn off the heat, I'm gonna remove it from the heat, I'm not gonna worry about it. If you look at charts of how the temperature goes when you're canning, okay, and we're going back to our green beans, it actually doesn't reach that 240 to 250 until about 4 minutes into the cooking cycle. So if the processing time is 20 minutes and the first 4 we didn't meet it, that means we only have 16 proper temperature pressure minutes. But if you look at that same graph, by turning off the heat, letting it cool down naturally, that graph doesn't drop off. It continues on for a period of several minutes to get you into that kill zone and actually produces the full 20 minutes. So guys, please don't shortcut that cool down process. Be patient, clean out a drawer while you're waiting for the pressure to come down. Let that canner sit exactly how the USDA recommends so that you will get to thermal death of botulism. I really hope you've enjoyed today's discussion on botulism. I hope that you learned something. I certainly did on the baked potatoes. I was a little skeeved out about it, but yeah, no more tinfoil storage of baked potatoes for me, because even though you're putting them in the refrigerator, that cool down time can be pretty low if it's kind of insulated in that tinfoil. Drop me a comment below. Any other thoughts that you have about safe canning practices related to botulism? I hope so. All right, and as always, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and I'll see you all very soon. In the meantime, stay busy, can safe, and make sure you get thermal death of botulism.